Well, hello. I'm here today with Matt Dallas. Matt is Chief Financial Officer at Zealand Pharma in Boston. Matt is a 1997 graduate of UT. He was actually a finance major. Matt is from Tennessee, grew up in Memphis, spent much of his life in the state, and now he's in the Northeast. And so I just invited Matt to come on today so we can just chat a little bit about what he's doing now and kind of how he got here, and hopefully make some connections between Matt and you all, my current students. So Matt, thanks for joining us today. Thanks for taking the time to skip some work and have a conversation here in the middle of the week.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So I guess just to start this out, Matt, could you just tell me and my students just a little bit about your current job at Zealand? Tell us what you do.
Yeah, sure. So I am the Chief Financial Officer for Zealand Pharma AS, and the AS is a Danish parent company. We also have a U.S. subsidiary, Zealand Pharma Inc., which is the one based in Boston. I'm CFO of both. It's a dual listed company. So we're listed primarily on NASDAQ Copenhagen, with an also what they call ADR, or American Depository Shares, listed on the NASDAQ US, on the Global Select Exchange. Okay. So being the CFO of that company, I'm kind of responsible for maintaining those listings, all the regulatory and accounting requirements of being a publicly listed company, as well as the company's kind of financial policies and kind of performance. And what that means is all the budgeting, all the forecasting that needs to be done for both expenses and revenue and cash. It also means public facing roles, such as speaking with analysts and investors about the company. All the public statements that we make, whether it be an earnings release or a press release, news flow, making sure that it's material, making sure that we have the right disclosures in place so that we don't put the company in jeopardy for not being kind of for holding back information. Companies get in trouble, employees get in trouble for not releasing what they call material information on a timely manner. In the US, it's 3 days after you know of an event. In Copenhagen, it's actually immediately upon finding out. So I have all of those kind of responsibilities. So the public facing and making sure basically the books are clean.
So clearly you've got a team of people that you manage under you to perform this function. So how big is that team that you interact with on a regular basis?
Yeah, so I have, within my team, in the US, I have about 8 people. And in Denmark, I have about 8 people as well. There's separate ledgers that get consolidated, and then you have reporting out of Denmark. And on a direct report basis, I have 2 people that directly report to me in the US and 2 people in Denmark.
And so from the accounting function of the firm, does everything in accounting fall under you as well? Yes. Completely?
Yes. Yeah, and where it gets tricky on that side is if you're a Danish listed company, everything has to be reported in IFRS, which was not something I knew. Obviously I knew that needed to be reported in IFRS, but I didn't grow up. I didn't go to school learning IFRS. My first 20 years of experience were in GAAP accounting and not IFRS. And so that does add one element to working for a foreign company that adds some complexities to it. So you need to make sure you hire the right people there that know conversions.
Yeah, so I'm curious. There's so many things under sort of the umbrella that's you. Within your current job, what do you really like the most? What kind of keeps you going, and what do you get excited about?
So the most fun part of being a CFO is the investor work, because it's not anything you get to do for all the way until you kind of are in this role. And so working with the investment banks, working with the hedge funds, working with the 401k companies, such as like a T. Rowe Price, meeting with them, traveling to their offices, representing the company, speaking to them about the financial health and the overall broader kind of investor materials with each of these people, and they're very smart and very nice people that you get to work with. And it allows you to meet a lot of interesting people, and it allows you to go a lot of interesting places. And like I said, it's not something you get to do until you kind of get to that role.
Well, what about the stuff that just feels like work? Just we've got to do this, and it's just part of my job. What can you talk about that end as well?
So that's, where that is. It's not necessarily the accounting work per se. It's all the regulations behind the accounting, right? All of the audit and the internal controls and the PCAOB and the Sarbanes-Oxley, all of the heavy accounting regulations. And over time, they've all gotten so long-winded that you really like just sorting through them, making sure that you know exactly what you're supposed to be doing, making sure that you're doing it the right way. And also, by the way, I'm not doing a lot of this, making sure you've hired the right people that know what they're doing and that you know that you can trust that they have that expertise.
Yeah.
Because ultimately it all, I have to sign off on all these numbers. And so, that's the hard part. It's just the regulations around basically financial reporting in, globally. Yeah. That's the trickiest part of this job.
Gotcha. Okay, well, let's just shift gears a bit. So we've talked in the past just kind of about what you thought about the world when you entered into college, kind of what your aspirations were, and so you were a finance major, but I got the sense from our last conversation that your goal was not to become a CFO; it was to go kind of a different route in finance. So can you talk a little bit about kind of what you wanted to do when you were 20 years old and how that evolved into what you're doing now?
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you what I wanted to do when I was 12 years old was be a stockbroker, right? And I think I probably watched the movie Trading Places too much as a young kid. Yeah, it had not made a lasting impression on me. And even though that was commodities, it wasn't even stocks. But I wanted to be down there. I wanted to be in the trading floor of the New York Stock Exchange, right? That was just in my head, everything I wanted to do. And so, from that point on, I wanted to be a finance major. When I got to Tennessee, I was a finance. I took accounting classes in high school. And I structured all of my finance curriculum to be more on the investment type classes, right? Because I'm sure it's probably still the same way, but you can, within the finance field, you can kind of choose your own path. The way through it. And I had chosen that path. And then, two major things happened. And we were discussing this as I graduated in 97. So, when I started school, the internet was mostly non-existent. Emails were Unix based. They would have a terminal at Reese Hall where I was living. There was one Unix terminal, right, where you could email other students across the country, and you'd have to take a class for it. You'd have to get a manual for it to even get your email address, right? These things were moving on. One of the first areas that they started aligning themselves towards was trading stocks. And you could tell that the stockbroker role in my mind, this was as I was 19, 20, 21 years old, the stockbroker role in my mind seemed to be one that could easily go the way of the computer. I mean, I also grew up in the 80s where the US was always worried about, people in manufacturing were always worried about losing their jobs to robots, right? So in my head, I was kind of conditioned to jobs being phased out by technology. And so that opened my eyes a little bit as to this job that I'm looking to do, number one, might not exist. Number two, I didn't actually know what kind of job I really wanted. The job I had in my head was actually a specialist that would be down on the floor and not a stockbroker. As I was interviewing, because there would be, a number of companies that would be recruiting for stockbrokers out of UT. And most of these were Atlanta or Charlotte based positions. And they were looking for basically retail like people that would come in and attract retail investors and become stockbrokers for them. At that point, the job I wanted was whatever job I could get. Right. Honestly, I was getting close to graduating. And, you know, it had kind of changed. I had one interview where the guy looked at me and said, "Are you motivated by money?" This is the opening piece. I remember exactly where I think it was in Stokely. And I looked at him, I said, "No, I'm not," which is true then. And it's true now. And he's like, "Well, this isn't the right job for you." It was very like, you know, it was actually one of the best interview questions I've ever had because I didn't like his answer, but it was completely and totally honest. And it kind of showed me like a little bit of like, hey, guess what? This is how the real world works.
Yeah.
Bit of a wake up call from being your kind of isolated kind of college person with no, you know, kind of, you know, in a bubble in a way.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so as it happened, you know, I would say that one thing I got out of UT is even in the late 90s, it had an amazing career center. And so there was always, at the time, you would have a little basic resume disc that every junior or senior would get. You'd load up your resume on it. So every student's resume was in a common format. And then you would look at these job companies coming on board. I'm sure it's evolved 100 times over since then. And you would say, "I'd like to apply for this, 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 and this." And then they would, you know, they would generate, if that company was interested in you, they would then pull you out for it. You know, you look at a board and there'd be like a list of interviews. So they did an amazing job there. And they also hosted a number of career fairs. And one company that I was familiar with, I just went to a career fair just by chance. And I had my resume in my backpack printed from these same uniform discs. And I gave my resume to someone at Kimberly Clark, which had a facility downtown Knoxville. They didn't at that time, but they did have a facility in Loudoun, which I believe they still do. And through that, you know, they liked my resume, and I was able to, you know, I interviewed in Loudoun a couple of days later, then in Atlanta, and that's who I ended up getting a job with. But at that point, it really was I just needed a good job coming out of school. I really didn't feel like moving back home or working at the disc exchange again.
Yeah.